And we'd like to welcome in Democratic media strategist Franco Ripple, also with us, Newsmax contributor Kevin Broderick. We like to call him K-Bro, for those of you who are in the know. All right, gentlemen, let's get started. When you take a look at a cross-section of what happened across the country yesterday, Kevin, you got to be pretty pumped up if you're a Republican.
Absolutely. This was a big win considering he won by 9 points. So it's a 14-point swing from what those closing polls said. It's supposed to be a 50-45 race. Ended up being a 53-44 race the other way. This also shows that, you know, we've all in the political class been talking about how the establishment Republicans are in trouble with these outsider-type candidates. And Devin definitely fit into the mold of an outsider candidate. But the reality is, the most establishment candidates around are Democratic candidates. They're known quantities, and this could be a big, big bellwether going forward.
Well, Franco, let's expand this out a little bit yesterday. Not just in Kentucky, but elsewhere around the country. Republicans increased their stranglehold on state houses around the country. Plus, you had the sheriff thrown out in San Francisco based on the sanctuary city issue. Voters in Ohio voting down a marijuana initiative. Down in Houston, they voted against this LGBT equality issue. So that tells us kind of where the pendulum is swinging, and it's not swinging in the favor of liberal Democrats.
Well, the first thing I want to know is where is my nickname? I expect the next time I join you on air, you'll
we're working on it. You'll get one, I promise.
You have such a cool name as it is. It's kind of hard.
Well, thank you. I don't agree that the pendulum is swinging towards the conservatives, although I will agree that Republicans certainly do have a stranglehold on policies that benefit middle-class Americans, such as fair wages and equality, which Houstonians voted down. It's inexplicable. The one thing I will say is that, remember, folks, this is an off-year election. Everyone's making hay about polls showing 14-point swings and everything else. This stuff can be hard to tell on a more granular state level. I don't think there's going to be any enthusiasm gap when it comes to the presidential election next year.
Well, I think one thing that we've learned, too, is in this current political environment, the pendulum might be swinging one day, or one way on one day, but it can come swinging back very hard, very quickly the other day. Let's focus a little bit closer on this Ohio marijuana legalization thing. Was this really a victory for those who are opposed to recreational marijuana and medicinal marijuana, or is this a victory for folks who say, you know what, it shouldn't be like this. You shouldn't have this monopoly, as it were. That's how some people classified it, on something like this. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I think this is a state issue with Ohio, right? And Ohio happens to be a state that's mired in a heroin epidemic. They have heroin overdoses that are off the charts. We're talking about hundreds of people a year, and that's an actual kitchen table issue for Ohioans. And so I don't know that going from 0 to 60, which is what they were trying to do, Ohio does not have medicinal marijuana right now, and so they were trying to go from no medicinal to recreational use. I think the steps to get to recreational use typically happen with going to medicinal for a few years, people getting more comfortable with it being a medicinal use, and then saying, well, maybe we should allow this for recreational use. So I think this is just purely a state issue with Ohio, and I think if the ballot initiative was on states such as Massachusetts, New York, Rhode Island, California, you'd probably see recreational marijuana passing with a wide margin, actually.
All right, we know this issue is not going away, Franco. When more voters go to the polls in 2016, do you think there are going to be more states that legalize or decriminalize marijuana in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, without a doubt, because again, remember, the electorate looks very different in a presidential year than it does in an off-cycle year. Democrats, frankly, nationally do a worse job at turning out their base than Republicans do, so it's not surprising to see a result like Ohio. I agree with Kevin that this is probably a state-by-state issue. You know, here in Florida, we had a medicinal marijuana ballot initiative go down only by a point or two in 2014. And the state did try to put through a monopoly just like they were trying to do here. And that's very unpopular with the free market conservative folks. So I do think you'll see more bites at the apple next year with a very different electorate in play.
All right, let's move over to Houston now. Houston's Equal Rights Ordinance also failed to pass. It's a law that offered kind of a broad non-discrimination protections in the state. Let's start with you, Kevin. What do you think that this says about our country, that this law did not pass? Some people think it may have something to do that it was so wordy.
First, I'm clearly pleased that it didn't pass. It seems crazy that I could put on a wig and use a women's room, or a sex offender could put on a wig and use a women's room. That seems insane. I think this is the left overplaying their hand. It's a repudiation of those who preach tolerance being the least tolerant and not respecting other people's views and saying, hey, I don't want those those individuals using a women's room. And you know, that's just people with values saying this is ridiculous. This is how we've been doing it for centuries, for millennium. And you know, why are we changing all of this now? It just doesn't make sense. And I think this is a good thing going forward because it says people are a little sick of being pushed around and they want to let their views be known. And this was voted down fairly soundly.
Well, we're going to talk a lot more about the ins and outs of what's right, what's wrong on this coming up in the next segment. But I do want to focus on this, Franco, because I think it's important. This is a political case study in how I believe the people backing the ballot initiative got snookered in the court of public opinion, losing out on this one. But we got about 20 seconds left. Perhaps also a bellwether about how Democrats and the folks supporting the HERO initiative got beat here.
Look, with all due respect to those who oppose initiatives like this, I don't understand the conservative obsession with bathrooms, restrooms.
Because they can use it to win. It was about winning, Franco, and that's exactly what they did. They focused on one issue, they made it simple, and it allowed them to win this issue.
It's time for some fairness. Conservatives need to embrace that if they're going to get with the times.
All right. All's fair and love war.
Some things don't age.
Thank you both so much for joining us for today's roundtable. Always a pleasure to have you. We'll come up. We'll work on that nickname, Ripple.
Ripple.
When we return, a roundtable takes a look at the latest polls, who's on top, who's not, and is Marco Rubio the new target of the GOP? We'll see coming up at our roundtable. You're watching Newsmax now. Don't go away.
Well, a lot of new poll numbers out today. We got to talk about these. So let's get straight to it. According to a Quinnipiac University poll, Trump and Carson are neck and neck now. Trump at 24%, Carson at 23%. Within the margin of error, they could statistically be a tie. Marco Rubio has made the most gains, climbing 5% to third place at 14%. Meanwhile, Jeb Bush is plummeting, falling to just 4%. Ted Cruz in the middle of the pack there at 13%, but sitting strong. Now, this latest poll also pushes Ben Carson to a surprising lead on the Real Clear Politics daily polling average, polling at just over 25% now, just ahead of Trump. Marco Rubio hovering about 11%, Cruz at 8%, Jeb Bush just over 6%, and Carly Fiorina coming in at 4%. Let's get into these poll numbers a little bit more and talk about some other issues on the campaign trail. Back with us again, Franco Ripple. We're still working on that nickname, Franco, and Kevin Broderick.
Keep working on it.
We'll withhold the nickname so Franco doesn't feel left out. Kevin, okay. With Trump and Carson at a near tie now, some of the attention has been deflected from Marco Rubio's gain, but of course not all the attention deflected. 5% is quite a jump, though. We're now seeing some more attacks on Marco Rubio. Can he sustain these attacks, or is Marco Rubio just the next guy to kind of make a little jump up and then perhaps fall back?
Well, I think that Marco Rubio is probably in it for the long run. I think he's going to attract some decent-sized donors to help him along so that he can ride this out a little bit more. The reality is Marco Rubio is a great communicator. He's got a very positive message, a hopeful message that reaches out to a lot of people. Not to mention his biography is great. It relates with a lot of different people. And I think that Rubio is in position for the long haul. And the idea that he's gotten up to 14%, those are unseen numbers by an establishment candidate since Trump entered the race. So those are pretty big. And they're trending in the right direction. He's had 3 solid debate performances. And you can argue that he and Cruz tied in the last debate or that Rubio won. So I think the sky is blue for Marco Rubio at this moment.
Franco, I'm going to let you weigh in here because I do want to get to these comments from Donald Trump recently. But you guys both know this situation with Marco Rubio that's come up in the past. Do you believe Marco Rubio is for real?
Well, I've actually said all along, I'm going to take a moment here to say from the left, we told you so. We told you that Donald Trump was going to have a summer swoon. It was the summer of Trump. But that eventually even Republicans would come to their senses and would see that this is not the guy to be your party's standard bearer. I think that Carson and Rubio both are running generally positive campaigns. That's why you see these very high approval numbers for Ben Carson. You know, Rubio tries to walk the balance between establishment and Tea Party conservatives. I think he's doing that well. And yeah, I think he's for real, you know, but there are some things that are going to come out regarding his finances, which CNBC tried and failed to press him on. These are things that have dogged him for years, and it's going to be interesting to see if the national political media can really make it stick this time.
All right, let's take a listen to something that Donald Trump said about Marco Rubio during a news conference yesterday.
That really Marco is overrated. And frankly, had Bush been a better messenger, he has the better message. Marco is a sitting senator, and he doesn't show up for the people of Florida. And I don't think he should be doing that. No.
All right, so interesting enough there, Donald Trump kind of parroting Jeb Bush, what didn't work out so well from him. Donald Trump today, though, talking about Marco Rubio's credit card from the Republican Party of Florida. You guys both know this has been litigated before in prior elections. Do you think anything's going to change this time around? Well, starting with you, Franco.
Well, the interesting thing about it is that when CNBC tried to bring it up, they largely got away with letting him say that these were discredited attacks by Democrats, when that is not true. Guys, we're talking legal judgments, foreclosures, credit card statements. There is proof of financial misdeeds and wrongdoing here, and he's trying to slough it off as discredited attacks, and that's not the case. Again, what we're hoping is that national political media can really dig into this, but there's another interesting part of that statement, which is that Trump made, which is that he's forgetting about the people of Florida. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see if that sticks too, because, again, in a poll recently, 66% of New Jersey residents felt that Chris Christie was forgetting about them while running for president. I'd be interested to see what people of Florida here think about Marco Rubio, basically saying, I don't want to be a senator. I don't like the job. You can't just not show up to your job, buddy. All
right, so if it's going to be tried by Donald Trump, well, Kevin, was it just the execution that didn't work out for Jeb Bush? Is this a legitimate issue or no?
No, I think Marco Rubio had a great response for it. I mean, you didn't hear Jeb Bush complaining about John McCain. All of these sitting senators miss votes. John Kerry, Barack Obama, you name it. You go back into the history of senators running for president. The reality is that's kind of a full-time job, and you're going to miss some votes. So I don't think that's going to hurt Rubio. I think the attacks are sort of petty, coming from other Republicans. And then as far as the finances go, that's sort of been litigated already. The credit card issues, it's been litigated. This is old news.
It didn't really work. It didn't really work in his Senate race against Charlie Crist. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but guys, here's the thing. The difference here.
Sorry, we got to cut you off. We'll have you back though. We'll call Franco the Rizip. Maybe kind of do a Snoop thing with it.
Frizzle.
Frizzle, right. Franco Ripple and Kevin Broderick, thanks so much for being with us, gentlemen.
Take care, guys.
Sorry to cut Kevin off like that. I'm sorry, Franco off like that. Still to come on Newsmax now, Houston shoots down a law aiming to give equal rights to transgender people. But did the lengthy wording of that law have as much to do with its failure as its intent? We'll talk about that with our panel coming up right after this.